You are listening to the Hire Fast podcast. In today's episode, I will talk about what does a trainer do really, and how do you identify a real one? Why do so many companies fail at training, and how do we get people to do what they're supposed to do? And what's the difference between training, instruction, education, learning, and why does it matter? All right, let's get after it.
The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Hire Fast podcast, a podcast aimed at educating you on hiring the right person for the right job and keeping them. Are you sick of spending precious time and energy hiring and training people just to have them turn around and quit? Then join Alan and his guests on Hire Fast as they teach you how to skillfully motivate and attract rockstar talent. Now here is your host, Alan Daviduk.
All right, so SMART is my 4-step blueprint to transform your company's employee engagement and retention. Skillfully motivate, attract rockstar talent. So today we're going to be diving into rockstar talent, which has two parts to it: training and development and rockstar journey. So we're going to do 2 episodes for each section. So in the restaurant world, training becomes secondary. It's like another function that someone does. And we do this nasty thing all the time where we just kind of buddy some people up and just send them out to learn stuff. And it causes a massive domino effect in our industry. So I've literally walked into places, including our own restaurants, and it drove me crazy where I'd see new hires literally just standing there, right? People just walking around them, walking past them, and they're standing there doing nothing because of this buddying up scenario that we've been accustomed to for so many years. Or they got the new person like washing dishes or sweeping the floor, right? Or doing all these other things that who cares about, right? But not doing the important stuff like waiting on customers and doing the actual work, right? So this whole process isn't effective. I remember this one day my mom called me and she said, "Hey, Alan, I got some good news." She says, "This girl," I can't remember her name, blah, 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 "wants to try training." I'm like, are you out of your mind? You don't just try training. I really, really believe, I firmly believe that training is like this thing, this entity, and it finds the right person for it to happen. Someone that wants to teach people. So one of the questions I have for you listening to this podcast is, what do you look for in a trainer? Or do you even look for things in people to be able to train the people in your company? I remember this, we were opening a new restaurant, and everybody's busy when you're opening a new restaurant and you don't have your systems and processes down, so things are a little chaotic and haphazard. And I remember this one girl, her name is Kaylee. And you'll meet her. She's going to be on a future podcast coming up. But Kaylee, she just literally, this one girl needed some help, and she just kind of gravitated over to her. She said, "Come on, honey, I'll help you with this," and helped her make the drink and do the different things and kind of spoon-fed her everything. And I said to myself, man, look at that. That's amazing, right? She just stopped everything. She just had this natural ability to teach people. And that's what I mean about training being this big thing that just kind of finds the right person to be able to do it. That's what I believe in. When we take people and we kind of buddy them up and we just kind of, force them to do something, what happens, right? We don't get the outcome that we want. People get frustrated, they get annoyed, they get short-tempered, they make the new person, the new candidate, feel shitty, right? And this affects our retention. We wonder why people leave, right? It affects the job satisfaction. People feel like they're not being set up for success. So, in our company, all of our trainers, they do work on the floor. So training is their number one role, but they're also doing secondary roles. We actually don't even call our head trainer a trainer. We call her the head of making customers love us. How cool is that, right? So what do trainers, what do they do? What's their role, their actual role? I define a trainer as someone that we place in the role, right, to help other people get the knowledge and the skills that they need to perform a job or a task, right? To learn to do stuff, right? That's what they do. So I remember I had this friend of mine, my daughter Lily was in class with this other kid, and his dad owned a restaurant. And we were at a father and daughter dance, and I was talking to the dad, and he was, we have a restaurant, he has a restaurant, so we had, some subject matter we were talking about, and he was super frustrated with things that were happening in the restaurant. So he said to me, hey, can you come down and just kind of maybe observe and tell me what you see? I said, oh, absolutely. He owned a Mexican restaurant. So I said to my wife, hey, we're going out to dinner. So I want to check this place out. So we go to dinner, we sit down. The girl sits us, and she comes over and puts the plates. We ordered some appetizers. She puts them on the table. So at that point, I said to her, hey, I cannot remember the couple's name, but that owned the place. But I said, hey, can you have, XYZ come out and talk to me? They're expecting me. So they come out and they sit with me, and I said to them, I saw something really, interesting. So I need your permission to talk to the girl, your waitress. And they're like, yeah, absolutely. So I call the waitress over, and I said, hey, I got to tell you this story, right, about this guy that goes to a deli and he wants some soup, right? So this old guy goes to the deli and he orders soup. And he says to the waitress, hey, have you ever tried the soup? And the waitress says, no, I've never tried the soup. I don't really like soup. He goes, well, try this soup. It's pretty good. She goes, no, I'm not hungry. So now he starts to get a little irritated, right? He's like, try the soup. Come on, try the soup. So she goes, fine, where's your spoon? And he goes, ha, that's the problem. So I looked at her and I said, you sat us, which was great, right? We ordered some appetizers, awesome. We got no plates, we got no napkin, we got no forks, we got no spoons. We have nothing that we need, right? And she goes, oh my God, I'm sorry, I forgot. And she runs to go get them. And I looked at the owners and I said, you're here, you're walking around touching tables, and you didn't see this, and you wonder what your problem is. This is your freaking problem right here. You wonder why customers don't come back, right? So how many times have you been to a drive-through and you got like a beverage, or you've been to a restaurant and, some place, and you got a beverage and they didn't give you a straw, right? Or you go through the drive-through and you had something that needed a fork, didn't get a fork, right? You didn't get a napkin. You didn't get ketchup or mayo, whatever you asked for. Or you asked for no cheese on something and they gave you cheese, or the other way, right? And what's your first thought? Come on, we're all friends here. What's your first thought? Your thought is, what the fuck? What a bunch of idiots, right? How do these people, they screw such simple shit up? Like, I said no cheese, how do you mess that up? Well, to answer that question, we have to go back in time. Now, I'm not that old, so we're only going to go back to the 1990s. But back then, and I'm going to talk about the donut business and the coffee business because that's where I live. You may be in the burger business or the pizza business, so you can associate the different products to this. But this has happened to all of us as we've been coming up through the ranks. So, we talk about that standard operating procedure where we buddy people up and, hey, Sally, meet Susie, go, and then I'm going to go in the office and do stuff, right? That's how it worked. But back in the 90s, in the donut and coffee business, we didn't have a ton of products, right? We had cream and sugar. Yay. We had, I don't even remember if we had artificial sweeteners. We had regular coffee and we had decaf coffee. And we actually called it Sanka back then, so that's super aging myself. We had some donuts and muffins, we had some bagels and a few sandwiches, right? Some cream cheese. And we didn't have headsets and all this fancy equipment that we have now, right? We had this stupid little squawk box that we just pressed a button and it was loud and obnoxious and it was staticky and half the time you couldn't hear the person. That's it. That's what we had, right? So training was pretty easy. So when you buddied someone up, they could fight their way through it because there wasn't that much to teach them. Right now, we fast forward to today, right? Go to a Starbucks and listen to what people order, right? There's like 15 different items that go in the coffee. It's like this massive scientific formula to make a drink, right? The sandwiches got all this weird stuff. This is gluten-free. There's 19 different types of breads, 4 different types of cheese. People want variety. There's whipped cream on things. There's foams and drizzles and like, holy shit, right? Now teach all this to a teenager that doesn't really want to be there anyway. Right? And their parents told that teenager, you need to go out and get a job. Let's decode what that means, right? What that really means and what the parents are really saying is, I need a professional babysitter for you that'll pay you to work, right? So this is what we're dealing with, right? So now this teenager who doesn't want to be there, or this adult, right, that's an adult child that we're trying to babysit, we're putting them out on the floor, and what happens, right? They start working, and then it starts to get busy, right? The customer comes in, orders 6 of these crazy drinks with 97 different items in them, each one different. Then they're out of ice, right? So now they're running out back to grab ice. Then they have a marker and they're trying to write things down. They left the marker on the counter. It got wet, so now it doesn't work, right? Then the little printer that prints up all the orders got jammed and is out of paper. So as they were plugging things in the register, now all those drinks with those 97 different items in it, they don't have anymore, right? Then the headset starts to beep because the car behind is there and wants to order. You tell the customer, hey, I'll be right with you because I'm already working on these 6 drinks with 97 different items in it. And what does the customer do? They didn't hear that, so they start ordering 6 more drinks with 97 different items in them, right? Now, the customer that's at the window says, hey, you gave my sandwiches to the guy in front of me, so now you got to stop everything you're doing and go make those 2 sandwiches, right? Because you handed it out to the wrong customer. Now the creamer machine is out of cream. The sugar machine's making funny noises and blinking. And now the drive-through timer is making beeps at you because your ass is moving too slow, right? Now the next person in line says, hey, I want 2 dozen donuts and wants you to list out every item that you have in the store. And you wonder why people quit and walk away. All this stress and pressure, right? It crushes us. It's demanding. And a lot of people get overwhelmed, right? In this environment, right? This is why they quit. Or they start thinking about quitting. They start saying things to themselves like, this is bullshit. I don't want to do this. Now they become disengaged, right? And they take that out on your guests. They take that out on the functions they're supposed to be performing. And the karmic cul-de-sac just starts to loop, right? And then, but let's remember way back what they said. Remember the last couple episodes, we talked about fit testing and interviewing, right? And what all that means. What did they say to us then? They said, I don't need any training. I can walk right in. I know what I'm doing. Well, they clearly didn't, right? So the system is broken. So what we're doing today is broken. So buddying someone up just doesn't work, right? You can see the stress and the pressure and how all these mistakes are made. So every time we bring a new candidate, right, we take a step forward, but then we take 2 steps back when they walk in the front door, they walk out the back door, right? So all this time we're trying to slow down this revolving door we have, and it's just spinning even faster. And, you know, when training fails, we always blame the trainee, right? The trainee is lazy. The trainee, doesn't do but it's not the trainee. It's the companies. It's the management. You're lazy. That's what happens. You this buddying up function, and then you go off and do something else, right? And then you get irritated as a leader when people don't know how to do stuff, right? You get frustrated now when you go out and you're in your peak part of the business, and the first thing that comes out of your mouth is, oh, this person doesn't know shit. Well, of course they don't, because you didn't show them, right? And a couple episodes ago, I talked about a conversation between a CFO and a CEO that they had about trainees, and the CFO, who looks at everything as money, right, said, what happens if we spend all this money training people and they leave? And the CEO, which looks at his people, says, well, what happens if we don't develop them and they stay? What will they do to our customers, right? So companies are afraid to teach people because they're in fear that they'll spend this money and then the person will leave and go right down the street, and it's like we're training this person for the company down the street. That is so short-sighted, right? Because we're looking at people as an expense. We're not looking at people as an opportunity to increase sales, to take care of our customers. Richard Branson had a really famous quote. He said, train people well enough so they can leave, but treat them well enough so they don't want to. So we got to eliminate this fear, right? We got to go all the way the other way. In my companies, if you're going to work for me, you're going to be trained, you're going to be communicated with, you're going to be over-communicated with, right? I'm going to make sure your ass has all the tools you need. Now, if we give you all those tools that you need and you still choose to do the wrong things, you don't execute, now we have a problem. And we need to go that way if we want to fix this. So we have to have a system that prepares people by doing reps, right? We can't just thrust them into that chaotic, crazy environment. We have to prepare them to handle that environment without them breaking down. So we have to We have to bring them through the process so they're strong enough when that stuff happens, they can handle it. So today, speed of service and guest perception is absolutely critical. Without it, we will fail as a company. Order accuracy and customer experience is fucking king. Like, you have to have this if you want to compete today, especially in the restaurant, QSR, fast casual world. The stakes are just too high. There's too many competitors out there, especially when unemployment is so low today, right? One mistake and the brand down the street is waiting to capitalize on your mistake, right? How many times have you had a customer say, right, I'm never coming back? Like, how many times have you heard this as a restaurant owner, right? One mistake. Guy's been coming in for 5 years, lives right down the street. But today, your person made a mistake and he's never coming back, right? And that's what he's screaming to people and putting on Facebook, right? Now, imagine you're a multi-unit manager or a multi-unit owner and you've got 10 locations or 5 locations. So now you have these same problems, all over the place, this way, that way. Like, this is craziness. So we need to have processes that we don't deviate from so we can assure that this doesn't happen. What we have to stop doing is taking our managers and our supervisors and our best employees and saying to them, hey man, you do a great job, so I'm going to reward you by giving you more fucking work and making you be the trainer now, right? This is what we do. This is our operating process, right? We need the trainer to be dedicated to that role. They can still do other roles, but their main purpose, their main existence is to be watching this all the time. And that's what we do in our companies, right? Now, what they also have to do is we can't segregate that person off, right, and just make them a high-powered Indian. They have to be part of the decision-making. If we got a new product coming into the store, they need to be part of that discussion because guess what? They got to teach the people how to do it, right? So you can't see what I'm looking at on my screen, but I have a hierarchy, and it's a standard hierarchy like most companies have, right? Where you have the owner at the top, you got, leadership, general management, multi-unit management below the owner, and then you break the organizational chart down into managers and assistants and shift leaders and crew members, right? But in my chart, there's one little different piece. Before the organizational chart starts to spread out, the trainer goes off to the side, and they're all by themselves. Right, because that's where they need to be if we're going to do this the right way, if we're going to be successful. So to start talking about this subject, now that we've talked about what's wrong, we have to start giving you some basic vocabulary. And that's how we're going to finish off this episode. We're going to talk about 4 pieces to training, what the trainers have to do. Training, we're going to talk about instructions, and we're going to talk about education, and we're going to talk about learning, right? Now, these words, they all sound like the same thing. You're like, well, they all mean the same thing, right? But they don't, right? Together, there's different skill sets, and they lead to different things. So that's what we're going to talk about. So training is defined as the action of teaching a person a particular skill or behavior. So you want your dog to sit, right? What do? Do you educate your dog? Do you instruct your dog, or do you train your dog to sit, right? You, of course, train your dog to sit. So you want the dog to do this specific task, sitting, right? Very precise task. You want the dog to do it over and over again, right? So you want the dog to consistently reproduce that and not change. You're not telling the dog to lay down, right? You're telling the dog to sit, right? So you don't want the dog to, you want the dog to stay very focused on what you're teaching them, right? So this intense training, the learner reproduces the same thing over and over again, right? So you want that behavior to have less errors, no thinking, right? Greater speed. Doesn't matter the conditions. If it's snowing or raining and you tell the dog to sit, the dog sits, right? This is what I mean by reps, right? We start to train people to do certain things so they do it without thinking. And it does sound a little mechanical and it feels a little mechanical, but you know what? It's supposed to, right? Because you want things to be automatic. You don't want to have someone with a notebook line out the door in your restaurant and they're like, hold on, I got to flip to page 17 to figure out what No, you want boom, 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 right? You got to do this. Brushing your teeth. Do you think about that? No, you just brush your teeth, right? Log it into your computer. There's only so many ways to do it. You put in the user ID, you put in the password, boom, you go. Now, you could be standing up, you could be sitting in a chair, but you still put your login, you still put your password in, right? Slicing a tomato, right? You do it the same way. So this is what you want. You want to get rid of that thinking, that load that's on the person's brain, right? They just do it without thinking, right? And this is what makes our lives easier and our people's lives easier when we're teaching them things. So now, instruction. Instruction is detailed information telling how something should be done, operated, or assembled. So you go to IKEA, you get the, bookshelf, right? And it's got that piece of paper in it. Now, the piece of paper is an instruction, right? But there's things that are missing in that instruction. Like if you went and built the bookshelf outside in the rain, there's going to be some challenges to that, right? So the instruction doesn't have all the instructions. It's assuming that there's certain things that, by you doing it, you're going to figure out, right? So people aren't robots. So we want people to generalize. Like we understand we've got the directions, right? But maybe we need to not do it in a dark room, right? We need to do it where there's light. There's things in the instructions that it's not going to say, but you have to figure out by doing. So imagine, right, we learn how to drive a car, right? We stop, we start, we turn, we do all these different functions with the car. But we're driving down the road and we see that that sign that has like the squiggly line, right? Krista, you've seen this before, right? The squiggly line. But what happens when it's telling you there's a curve coming, right? But it's not telling you what type of curve, how big the curve is. If there's more than one curve, it's just saying, hey, there's some curves coming, right? That's an instruction, right? So now all of a sudden, you're doing 40 miles an hour, this curve comes and you have to like slow down to 5. You figured that out when it happened, right? You figured that out by doing it, right? So that's the difference between training and education. So training, you reproduce what you were taught, right? You act automatically. You just do it, right? You learn without variation regardless of the condition, right? If it's raining, you do it the same way. If it's snowing, you do it the same way, right? But instruction, you have to figure some things out. You have to act accordingly, right? You have to adapt to the conditions. So if you got that box from IKEA and you're building it outside in the rain, well, it's not going to say in the instructions that if you build it outside in the rain, the shelves are going to be all slippery, right? It doesn't say that, right? This is what we mean so you understand the difference. Now, education. Education is a process of receiving or giving instruction, right? So this is how all these things tie together. I don't know about you, but when I think of education, I cannot get the image out of my head of, I don't know if you ever watched the Adam Sandler show, Billy Madison. Like that's all I can focus in my head is him sitting there in the room with all the fourth graders. But, education is typically what you learn in school or, if you go to college, right? But the education is the result of the training and the instruction, right? So what you learned, and then by doing it, education is what you learned, right? It's the experience and the events. It's putting it all together. So now learning is taking the acquisition of all the knowledge, all the skills, all the experience, right? And putting it all together. So learning is the change and the result. You go from knowing nothing to really understanding, right? That's what the learning piece means. So you take the training, the instruction, and the education, and now you've learned. So learning new things gives our people a feeling of accomplishment, which in turn boosts their confidence and their capabilities. And they also feel more ready to take on challenges and problems, right? Now this helps us and it helps our customers because when our people have these new skills, we all get new opportunities. So these are the types of things you have to understand when you start training and developing people. So this is part 1 of training and development. Now next week, what we're going to talk about is how to make an impact and get results. Problems that the trainers face with their learners, right? How people actually store information. And we're going to how do trainers facilitate transformation and get ROI, right? We can't just train people forever. We have to get them functioning as fast as possible. And then there's people out there that are called SMEs, subject matter experts. And you know these people. These are the people that know everything, but they can't teach anybody anything, right? And then we're going to talk about the solution of all of this that I've created called the bucket system. So thank you so much for listening today. You can visit me at getsmartsystem.com. You can email me at alan@getsmartsystem.com. You can call me at 1-888-3SMART-5. If you haven't already clicked subscribe or follow below, please do so we can keep you up to date on how to hire fast. Ciao for now. See you.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.